The topic for this episode is something I've thought a lot about in the last few years because I'm 42 and I'm starting to see signs of aging on my skin. And I've got to decide how I'm going to handle that. What's my mindset going to be? Do I want to do something about my aging skin? What would I be willing to do? Would I be willing to do Botox? Gretch Elizabeth, my guest, is a patient advocate for those harmed by botulinum toxin or Botox, leading a support group of over 36,000 people. Daily Wellness community, I hope you listen with an open mind to this episode so that you can make a truly informed decision about Botox.
Welcome to the Daily Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Melissa Meredith. I've led my family on a transformative health journey for over a decade, and now I help other families do the same. So this is a place where you can learn about healthy living and take the next step in your wellness journey. Hey, Gretch, thanks for joining the Daily Wellness Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you today and learn more. Can you introduce yourself to us?
Absolutely. So I'm Gretch Elizabeth, and I'm a patient advocate for people who've been harmed by botulinum toxin injections or Botox. And then I work a lot on the awareness side. So I run a Instagram page called Never Talks. And then I'm also on a team of people that spans multiple countries, and we run the largest injury support group. And our group actually spans 100 countries for members. And then, yes, I know. And then we just launched our website and our coalition called Tox Safety. And you can see that at toxsafety.com. And that's our coalition of which all of our other work now falls underneath of. So I'm really excited about that development.
Yeah. What got you into all of this?
Yeah. It's I tell people what I do and they kind of go, huh? That's weird. So I got into this line of work because my sister acquired botulism, or a systemic reaction called botulism toxicity, from a one-time treatment of Botox. And this was back in 2016. And at that time in my life, I was on maternity leave. I had just had a second baby, and I wanted to understand what had happened in her body. So given my science background, I have a background in science and education, I sort of dove down this rabbit hole to learn as much as I could about botulinum toxin, because I watched a really intense decline in my sister physically and mentally, and I wanted to understand. And it wasn't long before I connected with other people, and then they asked me to join their team because I just had this sort of like insatiable appetite or wanting to learn as much as I could.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your sister, and I hope that she's doing okay. But I am really amazed at what you guys have put together for people, all the resources that you offer. We're going to get into some of that, but it seems like you've just not just dove in and learned for yourself, but you've really helped so many others with it.
Yes, and that's really the goal. And I think what I want more than anything is to at least give people that opportunity to have the informed consent piece. Because for my sister, she felt like that piece was missing, and she didn't know that what had happened to her could happen. And that's what we're seeing echoed in thousands and thousands of people now. And so that's sort of the driving reason behind why I personally do this, is that I feel it's important. And it also gives back to me as much as I'm putting into it. So people are so thankful, and I get wonderful messages, and it makes me feel good to know that I'm helping.
Yeah. Do you know about how many people you guys have in your support groups?
Yeah, exactly. So I do know how many are in our support group. So when I joined the group, first of all, back in 2018, it was 2 years. We didn't find it until my sister was actually getting a little bit better. She was 2 years into her illness. And there was 1,100 people in the group when I joined. And now today we just hit 36,000. And then I know it's a lot. And then as far as I know, and then our growth rate is just astronomical right now, because the awareness side is growing, and a lot of the things that we're working on, and then also media outlets now are starting to publish more, with headlines saying, is Botox as safe as we think it is? And then people have been injured and they're going public with their story. So more people are finding us now. And so our growth rate right now looks like about 1,000 to 2,000 people per month.
Wow.
I know it's a lot.
Incredible. Yeah. Yeah. It's, I mean, I would never have thought that many people, are needing support for Botox injuries. That's just crazy.
It is. And then, like I said, we do span 100 different countries. So that is one part of my job that is really challenging, because right now we're trying to get everything translated, and we're trying to help people, who don't speak English, and get them the help that they need. And so we have all of those challenges, but we really are like the only resource for people out there that's been running as long as we have, and have kind of this comprehensive understanding of what the injuries, of what pharmaceutical botulism is and what these products can cause injury-wise.
Yeah. So one thing I learned from following you on Instagram on your Never Talks page is that, I think of Botox, I just think of cosmetic Botox. I mean, that was kind of my limited knowledge really of the use of it. But following you, I've learned that there's actually more than just a cosmetic use for it, and some brand names and things like that. So maybe it would help if you could kind of just give us an overview of kind of really what Botox is and some of those uses.
Yeah, definitely. So Botox is the original botulinum toxin A drug, and it's also called botulinum toxin A. And that was introduced in 1989. It was first approved for a condition called blepharospasm. So what that is, it's a therapeutic. It's used therapeutically to help with abnormal blinking of the eyes, or eye spasms. And then later on, as they started to realize its capabilities, more indications were added, which I'll touch on in just a second. But botulinum toxin A is a neurotoxin, and it's derived from a bacteria called Clostridium botulinum. And when put under perfect conditions of heat and time, this neurotoxin grows from that bacteria. And they learned that this neurotoxin can cause muscle paralysis, and for certain therapeutic indications, this can be rather helpful. And so, like I said, it was first approved for blepharospasm, and then now it has multiple therapeutic indications. So we have cervical dystonia, which is like neck spasms, spasticity in both pediatric and adults. So spasticity is abnormal muscle movements. It's also approved for chronic migraines, hyperhidrosis, which is abnormal sweating. And there's one other one. What is it? Overactive bladder. So those are the therapeutic indications. And those, again, came later, and they've been spaced out over the last, several years. And then it wasn't long also that they realized it could be used for wrinkle smoothing or used cosmetically. And so that approval came for the upper half of the face in 2001.
Okay. So not that long ago, really.
Yeah, it's really not that long ago. In my opinion, not that long ago.
Yeah. I mean, that's half my age, basically. So
yeah.
I don't think it's that long ago. Yeah. Okay. Well, that does definitely help, because, I mean, maybe there's a lot of people listening like me that haven't understood all of those therapeutic uses. And so,
yes.
I know you deal with people that have received Botox for all of those different reasons, right?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so if they are given when they receive that neurotoxin for whatever therapeutic use, if a warning is given, like, what do those warnings or risks, is there any kind of discussion about that with patients, or what does that look like?
So it looks different for every person, and we kind of hear an overall theme, which I'll touch on. But I will say that not all providers who administer the product, whether it be in an office setting, in a clinic setting, or a med spa, not all go and give the informed consent to their patients in the exact same way. Mm-hmm. So we hear from some people that they receive like a watered down version of the labeling. So what I'll say first is that these products, all commercial botulinum toxin A drugs, so whether it be Botox, Dysport, Xeomin, Jeuveau, and the newest Daxxify, they all carry the same black box warning label, which is a strict warning label that the FDA put on these products that state really clearly that the use of this product may cause severe or life-threatening side effects, long-term disability, or even the development of botulism. So what we're hearing from people is that everyone is sort of receiving a version of that labeling. And then there's some clinics who do actually consult with their patients more. They sit down and they'll go through the labeling with them to explain with them, more one-on-one. I would say that that's not the norm. We don't hear of that happening very often. In my sister's case, she was given a packet. It was really tiny print. It was multiple pages. And while her nurse was standing there, they presented her this consent form to sign, and she felt rather rushed to sign it. And in fact, the provider or the nurse even said, nobody really ever reads the fine print. Botox is really safe. You don't need to worry. If anyone ever read like all the details, nobody would get Botox. And that's her very words to my sister, going into the appointment. And wow, I say wow to that now because I'm like, oh my gosh, that was really downplaying the potential adversities that she could have, and then she did have.
Right.
So she felt rather rushed to sign that. And so we hear that a lot from people, that they kind of feel like either the warning label just wasn't adequate, or they felt rushed, or they weren't consulted with enough. And so the overall narrative is that people are feeling like they didn't know that they could suffer adversely to the product.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's getting pretty common in America for women to get cosmetic Botox, especially.
It is very common. It's so common, in fact, that it seems like it's being equated to nothing more than like going in for a manicure, right? You're getting your nails done. And regulations are different. It's a state-by-state thing, right? So there are states that are really unregulated, like Texas, for instance. And so that is a kind of a place right now that we're extremely worried about, because anybody who's not even a medical professional, right? They don't have a nursing degree of any kind. They're not a doctor. They can administer this product by...
They can administer a neurotoxin to people.
A neurotoxin, right, by getting trained by any number of different training facilities. And this is a big deal. And in fact, I've been looking recently in the last couple of weeks at some of these newer training facilities that have become very popular really quickly. And they offer these 1-day or 2-day courses to anyone who wants the certification. And then they even provide them a vehicle or an avenue then to obtain the product. And so it's something that I wrestle with. It's really, really dangerous. And like you said, it's a neurotoxin and it carries the strict warning label. But yet in some states, we're allowing pretty much anyone with just very little training to give the product to people.
Right. What do you think an adequate warning would be?
In my perfect world, we wouldn't see this product being used, because I am from the camp that there's no safe use, which I could talk about more in a minute. But and I know it's really unlikely that botulinum toxin will go off market. Okay. It's here to stay. And I understand and I accept that. So that's a great question. So in my perfect world, what I would see is this product only being administered by board certified doctors and dermatologists and people who are the highest level of doctors. Mm-hmm. That would be the first thing. And then the second thing would be that they are sitting down and having a consultation with their client that is anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to really give their client enough time to ask those hard questions and to consult with them, not only about the labeling for the product, but also about why they're seeking its use, particularly for cosmetic reasons, right?
Right.
Because this product has a duration, right? It is something that is temporary for the most part. And so you have to repeat its use. You have to get treated every 3 or 5 months in order for the product to continue to work, right? And then, of course, with repeated doses, more risk comes in. So I would like doctors to be informing their client of that fact, and then also making sure that their client understands what spread of toxin is and what that means. And do they understand that this product contains botulinum toxin A, which is the very neurotoxic protein that may cause botulism, in a human.
Right.
Or it does. It's not may. They may get it. It absolutely does cause it, though.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm just saying, if I'm kind of naive going in to get like cosmetic Botox and just thinking that I'm getting this simple thing done that's going to help me with my wrinkles, it seems like the ethical thing to do to like really consult with this naive patient coming in, or client coming in, and giving them the whole scope of what they're really going to offer.
Yes, and what's happening is they're telling them the opposite. They're saying this is completely safe. They're saying nobody ever has side effects. You would have they quote things that are I don't know where they come from, but they're inaccurate. They'll say, "Oh, you'd have to receive 3,000 units of this product in one sitting for it to cause a problem," and that's just completely inaccurate. The reality is that people with as little as 4 units are acquiring botulism from little tiny, teeny, tiny doses. And there's a number of reasons why this has happened, right? We have some ideas, but doctors and providers are not telling their patients that this can happen. And they're also not telling their patients that the more that you use the product, it may cause the muscle to experience muscle atrophy. And then that in itself is a counterindication for the product use, because an atrophied muscle then can't really hold on to that neurotoxin. And so it experiences seepage and it migrates into places where you don't want it to go.
Yeah, you just covered like 2 of my questions. So one was
That's okay.
like, yeah, does it matter like how big or small the dose is, or how frequently they're receiving Botox? I mean, is that any kind of factor of whether or not you're going to be injured?
Yeah. So it goes both ways. I can tell you that. And one of the reasons why that is because everybody's body is so vastly different, right? We have different genetics, and we take different medications, and we treat our bodies differently. And so these little differences in people may be one of the reasons why one person becomes extremely ill from 4 units, and then one person has 10 years of treatment before they become ill. So dose really doesn't necessarily matter, because we're seeing it happen in multiple ways. What may play more a role is the fact that this neurotoxic protein is completely unpredictable, and it's going to do what it wants. And, there may be batch strength differences too, from batch to batch, and dilution. Mistakes sometimes occur with providers. So there's a number of things. And then, of course, like I said, muscle atrophy, any previous or prior surgeries that a person might have had, any medications that they're taking. There's so many reasons why a person's risk may be enhanced. One of the ones that I like to touch on that a lot of people don't realize is that these genetic differences are pre-existing, say, autoimmune disorders that a person may have, but they don't know that they have. This is something that we think is definitely enhancing a person's risk to reacting adversely to it.
Yeah, that would make sense. You mentioned protein in there. Is it a little, I'm not sure. So you can clarify for me. Is it true or false that, some people have heard or been told that this is just the protein of...
They'll say it's a purified protein.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we hear is providers will say, this neurotoxin is completely safe because it's a purified protein. Right. And they're taking what purified protein means completely out of context. And it's unfortunate. And again, this goes back to I'm not sure where this misinformation comes from, but it is exactly that. It's misinformation. Of course, botulinum toxin goes through a purification process. It has to, right? So they grow this neurotoxin in the lab, and they put it through a series of purification in order for it to be isolated as a protein so that it can be used in the first place. Purifying it is not what makes the protein clean or makes it safe. Actually, what that does is it just means that it's contaminant free, and it's as close to naturally occurring botulinum toxin A as you can get, right? Because we see this naturally occurring in the environment. You can also get foodborne botulism. So if you were to eat a tainted good, like a bad canned good or something, or you hear of outbreaks in restaurants where something was, not cooked, I'm sorry, that's not right, where something came from a can and it was served to multiple people. I was going to say not cooked properly, but that's not exactly it either. Cooking it properly does not kill the neurotoxin that comes from the bacteria. It's still very, very dangerous. And so we see that occurring as well. So there's just this misinformation that because it's a purified protein, it must mean it's safe. No, that's not it. It actually just means that it's exact.
Yeah. Okay. And I know from listening to you that the people in your support groups are not all experiencing the same symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe it would be helpful to kind of go through what some of those injuries and symptoms look like for different people.
That's a super good question. So we have kind of 3 different kinds of people. We have people who come in and they are showing what we would consider to be clinical symptoms of botulism. And these are the symptoms that are outlined in the patient safety literature. So on page 53 and 54, which is the medication guide. And clinical botulism most often manifests in muscle weakness, inability to swallow, loss of voice or hoarseness of voice. They may experience shaking or internal tremors. They may have cardiac symptoms, neck instability, and these are kind of like the classic things that we see. They may even present like they're having a stroke in a way, like one side of their body may go numb, and these kinds of things. And that can happen for some people right after receiving the product, so within minutes to hours to the first couple of days, or like my sister was 5 days later. But then there's another camp of people who experience these symptoms, plus ones that are a little bit different, weeks to months after receiving the product. And the warning label does state that symptoms of botulism could occur, weeks after the initial treatment. And some of those symptoms also may look a little different. So in a clinical symptom of botulism that I didn't mention is blurry vision. But a person instead may actually experience tunnel vision or narrowing of vision, or they might lose their peripheral vision. So it's kind of the same symptoms, but they're along a spectrum, and people experience them from mild to severe. And again, everybody is different. So that's kind of one group of people that we see. We also have people who come in who experience more of like an allergic reaction. So it's displaying kind of like a hypersensitive reaction or allergic with facial swelling, feeling like they can't breathe. They might have like a rash develop, say, and then they go into the emergency room with the kind of anaphylaxis style symptoms. So we see that group of people as well. And then, of course, we also see people who then just think that something is wrong, but it's so mild that they're not really sure that it's from the product they received. Mm-hmm. So what's so interesting about this neurotoxic protein is that sometimes it poisons people kind of in a slow way. So people will have the development of secondary conditions like autoimmune disorders come up out of nowhere, or they'll have a resurfacing of bacterial illnesses that they kicked, like that they had before the past, like Epstein-Barr or mono, or even bacterial ones like Lyme. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they have it again. And they're like, why do I have this? But, just 2 weeks earlier or 3 weeks earlier, they received botulinum toxin injections, and now they have like full-blown Lyme. So we get these people in there too that kind of feel like the botulinum toxin maybe was a trigger, and that it caused these other things. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I think the timeline piece is really important that you explained to us, because I mean, I don't know if I, just personally would have thought like 3 weeks later, oh, this could have been related to my Botox injection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say that's kind of more, that camp of people is less, we see them less frequently. Usually what happens is that our people come to us because they have experienced something catastrophic that cannot be ignored, right? And so that can happen again right away, or it's people who've had the product over and over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden on, say, their 13th treatment, they experience this rapid decline or these symptoms that they're like, oh my gosh, something is seriously wrong. And they start thinking, what did I change? What did I do? Oh yeah, I just had my Botox. And then they're like, well, wait a second. 6 months ago when I had Botox, I was kind of feeling off then too. And then they start this connect the dot game. And then they realize that it was the product all along.
Yeah. And this is just 35,000 people in your support groups. Think of the people that aren't even in your support group, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about numbers. Yeah. Well, I want people to think about that too, because we have a lot of numbers that we can actually gather data from, and we can think about these critically. Like, they're not perfect, but they're better than nothing. So we have regulating databases in multiple countries, right? So for us, we have the FAERS database, which is the FDA. We have Health Canada in Canada. We have TGA. We have SAFRA. We have the MHRA, a yellow card scheme in the UK. And we can go into those databases and we can look at their numbers. And of course, the FAERS one is the most comprehensive. It's the best one, I think. And so what we're seeing right now as of today is that there's 71,000 adverse events reported, and that spans, of course, from approvals till today. So all the way back from 1989 to 2024. Actually, it's December 31st of 2023 is the last update. So from 1989 to December 2023, 71,000 reactions, 12,000 of which are considered severe. And what that means was a medical intervention was needed, and then just right around 1,500 deaths. Now, the FDA has published multiple times that their database, although helpful, really only represents 1 to 10% of the amount or the total number of injuries for any given drug.
Right. That's the first thing that came to my mind. Yeah. So I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking at really different numbers here. When you do that simple math, we're actually looking at something like 700,000 adverse reactions all the way to like 7 million. That paints a much different safety profile than what people are realizing. And then what I've done, because this is what I do, and I totally geek out on this because I love it, and it's fascinating, is I have gone then and looked at all the different databases and added up all those numbers together to kind of get a worldwide picture. And it's jaw-dropping. And so that's what I tell people to do. If you really want to know incidence rates, go look at the reporting databases because they tell us a lot. It's not perfect, but they tell us a lot.
Yeah. So with so many injuries, what does recovery look like for these people?
Yeah, it's different for every person. And unfortunately, some people do never recover. And so typically, I shouldn't say typically, oftentimes people do make a recovery to the point where they feel as though they can live a more normal life. Now, living a normal life physically is very different than feeling normal emotionally, right? Or spiritually or mentally. And so I should preface this by saying that. So most people do recover to a point. Some people will process through this illness in a matter of months, upwards to a year. Other people are kind of in that 2 to 4 year camp. And then unfortunately, we do have several people or many people who are 4 to 10 years out and still haven't felt like they have recovered completely. My sister feels like she has made a full recovery. The first year was terrible. She was unable to work. By year 2.5, she did go back to work. Yeah. And then by year 3, she had such a significant waning of her symptoms. She went from having 30 things like at one time in year 1 to then by year 3, only having a small handful of things that she was dealing with to now 8 years out. And she's 8 years out now to feeling like she has made a complete recovery physically. But again, that emotional and mental side, she will be completely different, for life, because this is very traumatic for people to go through.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, is if these injuries are permanent or not. And I really hadn't thought of, I was just thinking physically, when I wrote out that question, but I really hadn't thought of the emotional trauma that this is causing women and how that's going to impact them.
It impacts them severely. And what I can tell you is that PTSD is what we're seeing.
Right.
PTSD is a really debilitating illness for some. And it can be a lifelong illness. And it's also a very difficult one to manage. And so with my sister specifically, and she knows that I talk about her like this, she's okay with it. She has health anxiety that she never had before. Mm-hmm. And so prior to her becoming ill with botulinum toxin, she rarely had anxiety. She rarely was worried when she came down with something or was sick. But now, even if she's just a little bit under the weather, it causes her to have severe anxiety. And that's for herself. But it's also translated into her having severe anxiety for her family members. When her children are sick or her husband or even extended family, she gets very upset with health illness.
Yeah. So if someone finds themselves injured, what would you recommend that they do?
Yeah. So when someone finds themselves injured from this toxin and they're displaying the clinical symptoms of botulism, the first thing I would tell them to do is do not delay. Do not delay. And especially if you're within the first 2 weeks of treatment, get yourself back with your provider and say, I am experiencing clinical symptoms of botulism, and have the warning label there printed out along with a written account of the side effects that the person is having, so that they can tell their doctor, I have this, and this is what the patient safety says, the literature says I have. because the reason why that's so crucial is that they may be a candidate then for receiving antitoxin. And antitoxin, if they are granted its use, can mitigate months to years of suffering. So I would tell people not to delay and to really be in tune with their body. And if they are experiencing those severe symptoms, to be seen. Then the second thing I would tell people is to surround themselves with a support system, get themselves into our group, where they not only have people who understand them, what they're going through physically and emotionally, but we also can provide them with help on how to manage their adverse symptoms.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys have those resources available for people.
Me too. And it took a long time to get there. I remember back when I first started the group, there was very little there as far as resources, but we've all pooled together now. There's many people. This is not just me. This is not just my feat. There is a number of us who have devoted our lives to this cause. And particularly when it comes to the resource side of things, we've got different people who are writing and researching. We're paired with multiple medical professionals who see things the way that we do. And then, of course, some of our sufferers, they get to a place where they're feeling better and they come back to us and they say, I want to help, give me a job. And so there's a big group of us, and that's what's so cool.
Yeah. Do you have any idea what the percentage is of those different uses of Botox? Like what's the percentage of people using it cosmetically versus those other therapeutic?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can't really speak too much on the therapeutic side of things, but I can tell you that cosmetically, I have a stat site that I read frequently, and I think the last I read that they said it would be a $9 billion industry by the year 2026. And I think 9 billion. I mean, that is astronomical. So millions upon millions of people are receiving this cosmetically per year worldwide.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So not only are people receiving it for on-label indications, so whether that be therapeutic or cosmetic, but now we're just seeing it being used for pretty much anything and everything, right? And the latest to come down the pipeline is to use it for depression, which is pretty disturbing, but they're using it for depression, and then they're using it in lower halves of the face. The cosmetic indications just grow and grow. I mean, they're putting it in the trap muscles, and they call it ridiculous names like Barbie Tox, right? You've heard these in the calf muscle, even for calf slimming. Get this, Scrotox, because apparently we need to change the appearance of, the male parts.
Wow.
Like it's the indications every day I'm hearing of something, and I'm like, I thought I heard it all. But then a new one comes down. I'm like, I guess I have not heard it all.
Wow. Yeah. And I guess just to be clear, like, I'm not against people wanting to look their best, and I understand that. Like, I'm 42. I've never had Botox, but I definitely understand that, like, wow, you look in the mirror and you see yourself look different. And it's kind of, it can be hard to kind of grapple with those changes that you go through physically. And I get like wanting to like kind of hang on to your young self. Like, I totally get that. But just thinking in my mind, like, this is not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth the risk. And that's what I would tell people. It's just not worth the risk. With each and every time that you receive the product, you are risking that big, long, warning label of side effects or the development of botulism. And you really have to weigh the pros and cons of it. Is this worth temporarily smoothing, my facial lines when all of this could happen that would disrupt your whole life, spiritually, emotionally, down to the depths of your inner person. And then also for parents out there, for mothers especially, it really changes their ability to be a parent and to be the mother that they want to be. And it's tragic and it's devastating. And I can't tell you how many times women come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have just done it differently.
Yeah.
And then it's too late. It's too late to turn the clock back at that point. So, and I want to say that, of course, I feel that no use of botulinum toxin is safe for those reasons, but that the Never Tox community and our group accepts everybody. Everyone is welcome. And I don't care if you receive Botox and I can't change your mind. I don't care if you want to learn about Botox or you're suffering from Botox or you're a provider and you give Botox. That's fine. Everyone is welcome to join us. We want everyone to see what's happening because there is this missing piece out there of information. And everyone has a right to know that this is happening to people because only with knowing can you really make the best decision for yourself and right for yourself and for others if you are someone who provides the product.
Yeah, I mean, that's my philosophy with health, like in every area, right?
Yeah.
I want to be informed and I want to be able to make the informed choice for myself. And when you're not informed, like that freedom is being taken away from you.
That's exactly it. And that's why I think what our group is doing, and especially our public sites like Never Talks, is so important, because that is bridging that gap for people. And so a lot of people come to me and they say, aren't you worried? Aren't you worried that you're going to make the industry mad? Or are they mad at you? Do you have people come to you and say mean things and these kinds of questions? And sometimes we do. But for the most part, I just go and I try to educate, and try to be as kind and as open and loving as possible. And that seems to calm people down. And they're like, okay, well, maybe I could listen, and I'll open up my ears a little bit. And that's, at the end of the day, that's all I could hope for.
Right. Is there anything else on your heart that you would really love every woman listening to know?
So there is something that's on my heart that we've been struggling with as a team, and I don't speak on it very much. But what I want people to know is that the illness that this drug can cause in people can cause such a sense of desperation that there are some people who feel like life is no longer worth living. And that is something that is so on my heart right now, because we have hundreds of people who are struggling in that way. And they're coming to us for help. And I don't feel like I'm qualified to help people in that way. And so what's on my heart is that I would tell everybody to really, to your friends and your family members and the people that you're close with, talk with them, find out how people are really doing on a daily basis, and ask them, how are you really? There's a book that was written by Jenna Kutcher, but how are you really, right? I think we need to be asking people those hard questions and not just going through the motions, like really connecting with people on a deeper level so that you can identify when someone may be in a crisis.
Yeah. And I would just encourage anyone listening to share this episode, because this is information that we just aren't getting, like we're
getting that.
We're getting like Botox is fine, like it's common, like it's safe. Those are the messages that we're hearing, and we're not getting this informed consent piece. So I just encourage anyone listening to share this with the people in your life that you love.
Thank you so much. And and it translates into other areas too, not just botulinum toxin, but there's just a number of things happening in our world with our health and everything, right? So
Right.
For that reason too, even if the person isn't suffering from botulinum toxin, but there's something else, just we've got to be strong as a people right now, I think.
Yeah, totally agree. I have a couple of fun questions that I always end with,
Questions?
just to get to know you a little bit better.
That's so heavy.
I know, right? We're totally switching gears here. That was all great. What is your favorite morning, like, go-to drink?
Okay. Well, I do have coffee every morning, of course. I'm a coffee drinker. And I am not just like I don't drink black coffee or anything. Like, I have to put all the things in my coffee, which I've had to really kind of curb because the sugar, right, is not so good for me. But
Right.
I do like that really nice, like, vanilla mocha coffee thing. But for a real drink, every morning I have a smoothie. And that's what I have for breakfast. And I'm a smoothie gal. I like to put like I'm not vegan, but I put like a vegan protein powder in there. I like peanut butter powder. I use Greek yogurt and nut milk and ice and banana.
Just load it up.
One style, I'll load it up. And then sometimes I'll do like a berry style, but I am a morning smoothie drinker, and I've been doing that for a while now. I don't feel like my day is on the right foot unless I have my smoothie.
I love that. What's your favorite way to de-stress?
Definitely going outside and walking my feet on the ground. And I don't care where that may be, taking off my shoes and my socks and getting my feet into the ground. That is my de-stressor. And I love to go for walks, but sometimes that's not always possible, right? So I'll just go into my backyard and walk around in the grass. I know that sounds weird, but I like to have my feet with no shoes and socks in the ground. That is how I de-stress, mentally, just being in nature, and then physically by walking if I can.
Yeah, I That's totally me. I have a garden in the back, and I don't have
Nice.
gardening shoes because I always want to be barefoot out there.
Yeah, cool. And I always encourage my kids to be barefoot too. Just take off your, so you don't need the shoes. It's fine. Summertime, no shoes.
Yeah. It's a battle between me and my husband. He's like, wear the shoes so you don't get hurt. And I'm like, no, they don't need shoes.
Yeah, that is the exact same way with my other half. It drives him nuts when kids are not wearing shoes because he's thinking it's going to be like a stitches or something.
Right, exactly. That's
Yeah.
great. But who would you love to see as a guest on the Daily Wellness Podcast?
That's a really good question. Oh my gosh. So yeah. So can I go big or?
Sure, yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I love Drew Barrymore.
Oh, yeah.
I love what she stands for. I love her show. I love that she does not anymore. Maybe in the past, I don't know what her cosmetic injectable history is. I have no idea. But I can tell looking at her now today, and I watch her religiously, right? Her Instagram page, that her face moves normally and that she doesn't have neurotoxin there. And I love everything she stands for. And I love that she is aging gracefully and she is setting the stage and showing us all that it's okay to do. And she's beautiful. I love her.
Yeah, I do. I love her too. I've seen her show a couple times and it is really special.
It is special. Yeah. We lost Ellen DeGeneres, right? She retired. So now we've got Drew Barrymore, and I say it's great.
Yeah. I just feel like every time I see someone on her show, I'm like, she just loves everyone so well. It's just beautiful.
She does. And there's always lots of hugs, right? All the hugs that go around and the good feels. I love that.
I love it too. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for what you're doing. I honestly appreciate you. I've learned a lot just from your Instagram page. So definitely going to be linking lots of resources in the show notes for everyone, and just want to encourage you to keep at it.
Thank you so much. I will. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to today's episode on the Daily Wellness Podcast. We hope that you found it helpful for your own wellness journey. And if so, we'd love for you to leave a review. Then come back and listen for review shoutouts on upcoming episodes. For more information, check out the show notes and connect with us on our website, dailywellnesscommunity.com.